Hello! We're excited to tell you about how we used illustrations to enliven NOAA's Environmental Literacy Program Theory of Change report and how the illustrations embody the concepts we incorporated into our theory of change. But first, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Carrie McDougall. I'm a Senior Program Manager in NOAA's Office of Education, and I'm the co-lead for NOAA's Environmental Literacy Program.
And I'm Genie Bay, former Knauss Marine Policy Fellow in NOAA's Office of Education and lead author for the Theory of Change.
And I'm Jessica Bromley Bartram, and I was the illustrator and designer for the Theory of Change, and I'm a freelance illustrator and graphic designer.
So let me briefly introduce you to our theory of change, or our pathway to change. A theory of change provides the underlying philosophy or rationale for a program. It begins with a problem statement, includes interventions that address the problem, and has numerous causal pathways that systematically lay out the steps for short, mid, and long-term outcomes that must be met to achieve a societal level end goal. In other words, it presents high-level theoretical concepts as well as detailed outcomes. We recognized early on that if we wanted people to engage with this work, that it would need to be aesthetically pleasing and inviting. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague Genie to present additional details.
When the co-leads of the Environmental Literacy Program and I set out to create this theory of change, we knew we would face a major challenge turning dense, theoretical ideas into visually compelling graphics. As you can see pictured here, examples of other theories of change often display a series of boxes and arrows representing causal links and feedback loops with assumptions and interventions inserted along the way. This theory of change diagram, taken from the UK Climate Impacts Programme, was a major influence in the early stages of the development of our theory of change, which you can probably see here in this example of one of our first attempts at creating a causal pathway. I suppose this is what you end up with when you take a geographer and two marine scientists and charge them with the task of developing a theory of change. After about a year of creating this material, we realized that we needed to bring in someone more talented in the ways of visual communication. When we found Jessica, we could tell from her portfolio that she would be the perfect person to help turn our concepts into a more tangible, visual reality. We also knew from our literature review that hope serves as a precondition to action. We found that in recent decades, efforts to educate about climate change have failed to inspire children, youth, and adults to take sufficient action. While there are many reasons for this inaction unrelated to education, most educational approaches to date have had limited effectiveness in inspiring change because they have been too focused on the causes, the global scale of the problem, and impacts too distant from learners. To complicate matters further, as learners acquire more knowledge about climate change and its impacts, they are often stifled by feelings of hopelessness and anxiety caused by comprehending the magnitude of the impacts and the complexity of the problem. These challenges highlight the need to improve public understanding of how climate change can manifest at the community level, and to help community members contextualize how individuals and the places they love could be impacted. As such, we very intentionally asked Jessica to create illustrations showing people taking actions that contribute to a solution. Furthermore, promoting the ability to envision a better future helps to motivate people to take action, especially when individuals are able to see themselves represented in the solution implementation process. From here, I'll pass things over to Jessica to describe the process that she underwent to turn our ideas into appealing imagery.
The NOAA team had been working on the theory of change for about a year before I got on board. Once they gave me all the material they had developed, my work began. For every project, my initial approach is twofold. First, I go and do my own research on the topic at hand. In this case, I explored the ELP website and researched any terms or ideas I was unfamiliar with. This allowed me to start gathering concept ideas and to put together a list of questions for the NOAA team. This led to the second part of my approach, to have an in-depth discussion with the NOAA team about any ideas for the project's visuals they might have and any visuals or ideas they wanted to avoid. This combination of independent research and client consultation allowed me to move forward to the concept phase with a multifaceted view of the project's contents. The theory of change as a whole is conceptual and informationally dense, and it was my job to create visuals that help unpack the information and invite people to engage with the material. The first piece we worked on was the resilient community illustration, which needed to sum up the whole project and its goals in a single image. This meant I needed to fit a lot into it: short-term preparedness actions, long-term resilience strategies, carbon mitigation, community action, and have it all be visually compelling and legible. It was an exciting challenge. I began the process of creating the resilient community illustration with rough sketches for 2 initial concepts, which I developed from basic pencil sketches to more detailed rough concepts. My first concept was a bird's eye view tilted map, which depicted elements of the problems the ELP grants aim to address. These included flooding, extreme heat, sea level rise, and so on. My next concept showed the landscape in layers, placed one in front of the other, and focused only on the solutions and the positive results of resilient community actions. This is the one we chose, and continue to expand upon and edit based on regular meetings with the NOAA team. It became an iterative process of adding to and refining the elements of the image until it encompassed the whole theory of change vision. I began to add color to the equation until we ended up with the final result of our many weeks of collaboration.
After these multiple iterations as a team, our final environmental literacy program, Vision of a Resilient Community Illustration, represents the end goal of our theory of change. Here we see a community that is equitable, just, and inclusive. The community is governed by policies that reflect the values of diverse community members. Dramatic differences in vulnerability to climate change no longer exist. Community members understand the environmental hazards that impact them, and they know what to do to address them. The community is sustainably built and greenhouse gas emissions are reduced. Community members learn from each other and where they live, and they help each other in times of need. They also cooperate to restore ecosystems. Community members are informed, civically engaged, and are hopeful about the future. All people, infrastructure, and ecosystems are resilient, and the community is collectively environmentally literate. In our theory of change, we identified many different approaches that lead to this end goal. These are called causal pathways. Listed here are the 6 causal pathways that we have included in our theory of change thus far. Outcomes in each pathway contain references to specific audiences that the environmental literacy program grants engage, and activities that are being employed and proving to be effective. From here, Jessica will describe the process that she took to turn these pathways into captivating diagrams.
The causal pathways were as much of a structural challenge as the resilient community illustration, as I had to distill over 100 concepts into individual icons and figure out how to arrange them in a readable and visually appealing way that also matched the character and mood of the resilient community illustration. These were the first 2 sketches, and then I moved ahead with a concept that drew inspiration from NOAA's nautical charts. I created a series of maps within a flexible template, which allowed all the pathways to be visually similar, while also accounting for their differing numbers of icons and text boxes, as few as 6 or as many as 20. We developed the 6 individual pathways first, then built the overall pathway to change, which was introduced by Carrie early in this presentation, afterwards. This meant I was able to bring in and combine icons from the other 6 pathways, so the final pathway to change feels like a cohesive summation of the causal pathway journey. As depicted in these icons from the causal pathways, even when the image references a negative climate change event, for example flooding, shoreline erosion, or extreme storms, the illustration is action and solutions oriented. Depicting vulnerability through depicting solutions to that vulnerability shows resilient communities as a place of hope, which can encourage individuals to engage in climate change solutions.
Another important aspect of the development of these illustrations was to ensure that they adequately represented both ELP's currently funded projects as well as the grantees that ELP would fund in the future. This meant displaying a broad diversity of communities ranging in size from rural to urban, whose members include a diversity of genders, races, ages, abilities, ethnicities, and so on.
We weren't able to fit everyone, but I made an effort to depict as much diversity as possible through the icon illustrations. When approaching a project like this, it's important to think about what diversity means to you and your project, and then communicate that to the illustrator. For example, the NOAA team needed to show their partners, diversity at community scale, those taking part in ELP-funded projects, and also a range of ages. I went from there in terms of representation, adding as much diversity as possible over the course of creating the resilient community illustration and the causal pathway icons. From here, Genie will highlight some literature that supports our overall message.
Our work with Jessica has proven to be successful, and that we're hearing from many people that these illustrations help make the ideas communicated in our Theory of Change report more accessible. As a result, these visualizations are influencing people's perception of climate change and community resilience. This idea is supported in relevant literature, which has brought to light the significant ways in which artistic depictions of climate impacts and solutions help to shape socio-political and cultural responses to climate change. Furthermore, artistic renderings of climate change and its impacts can help engage audiences who may otherwise be disenchanted or overwhelmed by climate science, and can shift public perception around the issue, often leading to pro-environmental behavioral change.
As a team, we've taken away a series of lessons from our collaboration. For instance, through my previous work experience, I've incorporated the values and learned the vocabulary of equity and social justice, which I saw reflected in the work the NOAA team was aiming to accomplish with their theory of change, and allowed our collaboration to be very complementary. This is important to keep in mind if you're looking to work with an illustrator in the future.
We also learned that there is beauty in interdisciplinary collaboration. The NOAA team could not have imagined more successful results. Jessica's artistic contributions have added dimensionality to our work and have truly elevated the ideas articulated in the Theory of Change and its accompanying report. We've gotten so much more interested in this work due to these inviting illustrations. Overall, inspiring hope and empowering people to become agents of change through the combination of illustration and research can be a critical step in making climate change relevant to a wide range of individuals. And we hope that these illustrations will make our theory of change more accessible to diverse audiences. So that marks the end of our presentation. We will paste these links into the chat for those of you who are interested in reading the full Theory of Change report and want to learn more about NOAA's environmental literacy program. You can also access Jessica's full portfolio at her website, which we will link in the chat as well. Thank you all for attending our presentation, and we welcome any feedback or questions that you may have.